In the labyrinth of our existence, where chaos and uncertainty reign supreme, the ancient philosophy of Stoicism emerges as a beacon of light, guiding us through the tumultuous waves of life. As we confront unprecedented global challenges, it is not merely a set of principles but a profound mindset that defines the Stoic resilience we need today. Imagine standing amidst the tempest of our times, the echoes of adversity reverberating through the corridors of our souls. In these moments we turn to the Stoic sages, who like pillars of granite withstood the storms of their era. Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, their words echo through the annals of history, reminding us that the only true control lies within. Stoicism, a philosophy not for the faint of heart, but for those seeking a sanctuary of strength within. It beckons us to confront the chaos, not with the futile resistance of a fragile vessel against a raging sea, but with the stoic serenity of a seasoned sailor, navigating through the tempest. In the crucible of Stoicism, emotions metamorphose into a crucible of self-mastery. The Stoic mind, an alchemist, transmuting destructive emotions into the gold of resilience. The echo of Epictetus resonates. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. The Stoic soul, unyielding in the face of adversity, embraces challenges not as burdens, but as opportunities for growth. As we stand at the crossroads of uncertainty, we must remember the Stoic embrace of fate. The cosmic web of events unfolds beyond our control, yet within this intricate dance lies the canvas of our character. He who fears death will never do anything worth of a man who is alive, Seneca whispers to us across the centuries, urging us to transcend the shackles of fear and embrace the inevitability of change. United, we stand bound by the Stoic thread that weaves through the fabric of our collective resilience. This is not a solitary journey. It is a pilgrimage undertaken by kindred spirits, a fellowship of Stoics navigating the labyrinth together. In the words of Marcus Aurelius, very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. The Stoic flame within us burns with an unwavering intensity, a torch passed down through the ages. As we face the crucible of our times, let us carry this flame forward, illuminating the path of resilience for ourselves and those who walk beside us. In the crucible of global challenges, Stoic philosophies stand as stalwart guides, offering individuals a formidable toolkit to navigate the tempests of pandemics, economic crises, and geopolitical uncertainties. Rooted in the teachings of ancient sages like Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, Stoicism provides a resilient framework that is particularly relevant in our tumultuous contemporary landscape. 1. Control of perception and action. At the core of Stoic philosophy lies the concept of understanding what is within our control. In the face of a pandemic, for instance, external factors may be beyond our grasp, but our perceptions and reactions remain firmly within our dominion. By focusing on what we can control, our attitudes, responses, and actions, Stoicism equips individuals to maintain composure amidst chaos, fostering a mindset that seeks opportunity within adversity. 2. Adaptability and acceptance. Stoicism encourages acceptance of the inevitable. In times of economic crises or geopolitical uncertainties, individuals can draw from the Stoic principle of amor fati, or love of fate. By embracing circumstances rather than resisting them, Stoicism fosters adaptability. This doesn't imply passive acceptance, but rather an active engagement with the present moment, enabling individuals to pivot in response to challenges and find purpose even in uncertainty. 3. Resilience through virtue. The Stoic emphasis on cultivating virtues like courage, wisdom, justice, and temperance serves as an anchor in the face of global challenges. In a pandemic, virtues guide individuals to act responsibly for the collective well-being. Economic crises may test one's resolve, but the Stoic virtues provide a moral compass, steering individuals towards ethical decisions even when the currents are turbulent. 4. Mindfulness and equanimity. In the storm of uncertainty, Stoicism teaches individuals to cultivate mindfulness and inner tranquility. By practicing moment-to-moment awareness, individuals can detach themselves from the anxieties of an unpredictable world. Stoicism encourages the development of a stoic calm, a state of mind that allows individuals to navigate challenges with clarity and equilibrium, avoiding being swept away by emotional turbulence. 5. Community and cosmopolitanism. Stoicism places importance on our interconnectedness with humanity. In the face of global challenges, this perspective becomes crucial. Stoics recognize the shared human experience and the responsibilities that come with it. This communal outlook fosters cooperation, empathy, and a sense of duty toward others, providing a foundation for collective resilience and unity during pandemics or geopolitical upheavals. Certainly, let's delve deeper into specific Stoic approaches to navigating global challenges. 6. Stoic mindfulness and attention control. In the face of a pandemic, economic downturn, or geopolitical turmoil, the Stoic practice of mindfulness becomes a potent tool. By honing the ability to direct attention purposefully, individuals can filter out the noise and focus on what truly matters. This involves not succumbing to panic or fear-driven narratives, but cultivating a deliberate awareness of the present moment. Mindfulness, as advocated by Stoicism, becomes a shield against the psychological toll of uncertainty. 7. Epictetean dichotomy of control. Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher, introduced the concept of the dichotomy of control, distinguishing between things within our control and those outside it. In the context of global challenges, individuals can apply this principle by discerning between personal decisions and external events. This dichotomy empowers individuals to invest energy where it can yield meaningful impact, fostering a sense of agency, even in the face of overwhelming circumstances. 8. Stoic resilience training. Stoicism offers a unique form of resilience training. Just as physical exercise strengthens the body, the Stoic practice of deliberately exposing oneself to discomfort, challenges, and uncertainties fortifies the mind. This could involve consciously embracing discomfort in daily life, setting voluntary challenges, or reflecting on past adversities with a Stoic mindset. Through this, individuals build emotional and mental fortitude, better preparing them for the unpredictable nature of global challenges. 9. Hierarchian obstacle perception. The Stoic philosopher Hierocles compared life's challenges to obstacles in a field. By viewing challenges as stones that can be turned into stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks, individuals adopt a transformative mindset. In times of economic crises or geopolitical uncertainties, the Stoic approach encourages reframing difficulties as opportunities for personal and collective growth. Each obstacle becomes a chance to exercise virtues and refine character. 10. Stoic ethics in decision-making. In the labyrinth of geopolitical uncertainties, Stoic ethics become a guiding compass. The Stoic virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance inform decision-making processes. Leaders facing tough choices during a crisis can turn to Stoic principles to ensure their decisions align with ethical standards. This not only promotes individual integrity, but contributes to the creation of a more just and resilient society. 11. Stoic contemplation of impermanence. The Stoic acknowledgement of the transient nature of all things can be particularly comforting in times of global upheaval. Meditating on the impermanence of both joys and sorrows helps individuals maintain perspective during pandemics or economic crises. This contemplation fosters a detachment from immediate emotional reactions, allowing for a more measured and composed response to challenges. 12. Stoic philanthropy and altruism. The Stoic concept of cosmopolitanism, or a sense of global citizenship, encourages individuals to extend their concern beyond personal interests. In times of pandemics, Stoics may find purpose in contributing to the welfare of the broader community. Acts of philanthropy and altruism, guided by Stoic principles, create a network of support and solidarity, reinforcing the idea that we are all interconnected in the face of global challenges. By embracing these nuanced Stoic approaches, individuals can navigate the intricate tapestry of global challenges with a heightened sense of self-awareness, resilience, and ethical clarity. Stoicism, as a timeless philosophy, continues to offer profound insights that resonate with the complexities of our modern world. In essence, Stoic philosophies provide a timeless guide for individuals confronting the complexities of our contemporary world. By embracing the Stoic mindset, individuals can harness their inner strength, transcend the immediacy of challenges, and forge a path of resilience through wisdom and benefits, ultimately leading to positive outcomes. Here's an in-depth exploration of how a Stoic mindset becomes a catalyst for positive transformation in the face of today's challenges. 1. Emotional resilience and well-being. The Stoic emphasis on understanding and controlling one's reactions to external events cultivates emotional resilience. In the midst of global challenges such as pandemics or economic crises, where emotional turbulence is prevalent, a Stoic mindset allows individuals to navigate these storms with equanimity. By acknowledging the impermanence of external circumstances, individuals can maintain a stable emotional core, leading to improved mental well-being. 2. Focused decision-making. The Stoic practice of differentiating between what is within and outside of one's control sharpens decision-making. Amidst the complexity of geopolitical uncertainties or economic crises, individuals with a Stoic mindset concentrate their efforts on factors they can influence. This focused approach enables more effective decision-making, preventing wasted energy on futile concerns and contributing to positive outcomes in personal and professional spheres. 3. Adaptability and innovation. Stoicism teaches individuals to embrace change rather than resist it. In the dynamic landscape of today's world, marked by rapid technological advancements and societal shifts, adaptability is crucial. A Stoic mindset fosters a willingness to pivot, innovate, and find opportunities within challenges. This adaptability becomes a key driver for personal and professional growth, leading to positive outcomes in diverse and evolving environments. 4. Enhanced relationships and empathy. Stoicism's emphasis on virtue, justice, and cosmopolitanism guides individuals towards ethical behavior and empathy. In a world facing pandemics and social upheavals, a Stoic mindset fosters a sense of shared humanity. This ethical foundation strengthens relationships, promoting collaboration and unity. The Stoics' commitment to virtue contributes to a positive social impact, creating a ripple effect that extends beyond individual well-being. Adopting a Stoic mindset in the contemporary world offers a reservoir of psychological, emotional, and practical benefits, ultimately leading to positive outcomes. Here's an in-depth exploration of how a Stoic mindset becomes a catalyst for positive transformation in the face of today's challenges. 1. Emotional resilience and well-being. The Stoic emphasis on understanding and controlling one's reactions to external events cultivates emotional resilience. In the midst of global challenges such as pandemics or economic crises, where emotional turbulence is prevalent, a Stoic mindset allows individuals to navigate these storms with equanimity. By acknowledging the impermanence of external circumstances, individuals can maintain a stable emotional core, leading to improved mental well-being. 2. Focused decision-making. The Stoic practice of differentiating between what is within and outside of one's control sharpens decision-making. Amidst the complexity of geopolitical uncertainties or economic crises, individuals with a Stoic mindset concentrate their efforts on factors they can influence. This focused approach enables more effective decision-making, preventing wasted energy on futile concerns and contributing to positive outcomes in personal and professional spheres. 3. Adaptability and innovation. Stoicism teaches individuals to embrace change rather than resist it. In the dynamic landscape of today's world, marked by rapid technological advancements and societal shifts, adaptability is crucial. A Stoic mindset fosters a willingness to pivot, innovate, and find opportunities within challenges. This adaptability becomes a key driver for personal and professional growth, leading to positive outcomes in diverse and evolving environments. 4. Enhanced relationships and empathy. Stoicism's emphasis on virtue, justice, and cosmopolitanism guides individuals towards ethical behavior and empathy. In a world facing pandemics and social upheavals, a Stoic mindset fosters a sense of shared humanity. This ethical foundation strengthens relationships, promoting collaboration and unity. The Stoics' commitment to virtue contributes to a positive social impact, creating a ripple effect that extends beyond individual well-being. As we draw the curtains on our exploration of Stoic resilience in the face of today's challenges, I invite you, dear viewers, to take a moment and reflect on the profound wisdom embedded in this timeless philosophy. The Stoic mindset, with its emphasis on emotional resilience, focused decision-making, adaptability, ethical behavior, gratitude, productivity, and personal empowerment, emerges as a guiding beacon in our contemporary labyrinth. In a world beset by uncertainties, Stoicism offers not just a philosophy, but a transformative way of being, a solace for the soul amidst the chaos. As you embark on your own journey of self-discovery and resilience, we encourage you to delve deeper into the Stoic principles that have withstood the test of time. If you found solace and inspiration in our discussion today, we kindly ask you to show your support by hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel, Stoic Solace Society. By joining our community, you become a part of a fellowship dedicated to navigating life's challenges with wisdom, fortitude, and a Stoic spirit. May the echoes of Stoic philosophy resonate in your daily endeavors, guiding you towards a life of meaning, purpose, and positive transformation. Thank you for being a part of the Stoic Solace Society. Until our next exploration, stay resilient, stay stoic, and may your journey be filled with solace.